I'm going to get some housekeeping out of the way first, and then eventually I'm going to invite you guys in so that you can ask me questions and all that good stuff. So I'm gonna give you a chance to get in first. So we're gonna do a little bit of housekeeping. You know how we do on the first day of school. We gotta lay some ground rules, gotta lay these good ground rules. And so let me tell you before we get started, right? Before we get started, I have to let you know, Dr. Hall is not like any other professor that you may have met. I'm not tight-lipped. I don't talk like this. And I'm actually, I refer to myself as a sophisticated ratchet, right? Because I'm sophisticated, but I can also be a little ratchet, right? I believe myself to be a hood scholar, a scholar of the people. I love Erica Badu's quote where she says, "What good do your words do if they can't understand you?" Now, even though I'm a wordsmith, right? I'm a wordsmith. I love to make sure that whatever it is that I'm teaching, I make it plain so that everybody can understand, and everybody, no matter what level, can walk away feeling like they learned something and that they were able to give something. Because I believe that learning is an interactive exchange. We're on the same page. As learning is an interactive exchange. So it's not just a one-way street. It's not just, the professor is here and nobody else gets a chance to say their particular viewpoints or opinions, but it's an interactive exchange. One of my favorite books, and if you've ever watched me live, you probably heard me talk about it before. One of my favorite books that I talk about quite often is a book by a Brazilian educational theorist by the name of Paulo Freire. And Paulo Freire has a book that is called Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Somebody type that in the comments for me, because I'm going to give you some reading, some takeaways, so that you can further your knowledge base, because it's always good to have information, and information that is applicable to your everyday living. So Paulo Freire has this book called Pedagogy of the Oppressed, right? And what that simply means is, if you look at the title tells you everything that you need to know about the text. The title essentially is saying that people from impoverished communities, people from minorities, and people from disenfranchised spaces, they're usually educated in such a way that it works to maintain their oppression, right? They're usually educated in such a way that it works to maintain their oppression. That's what the whole book is talking about, right? And one of my favorite quotes from that book that Dr. Freire says is, and it's Freire, Toddy, F-R-I-E-R. I'm sorry, F-R-I-E-R-E, Freire, right? One of my favorite quotes in that book that Freire says, and I'm kind of giving it to you in a way that it's like, I'm going to give you in layman's terms what he says. He says that one of the biggest mistakes that oppressed people make is to think that to be is to be like. I'm going to say that again for my students that are sitting in the back of the room and they didn't hear me the first time. Freire says that one of the biggest mistakes that oppressed people make is that they think that to be means to be like. Are y'all, give me some thumbs up if y'all picking up what I'm laying down. Give me some thumbs up if you're picking up what I'm laying down. Right? And so in that, one of the struggles, and this is something that he also says that I think that we need to understand, is that liberation, he says this, and I'm giving it to you in layman's terms. He said, nobody ever gets free and stays free, because liberation is a continuous struggle. Are y'all picking up what Dr. Hall is laying down? Say yes in the comments. Give me some thumbs up, right? Because I'm very black. I don't know if you can see it, And black folk work on call and response, right? If you've ever been to church before, the preacher, he really gets in the zone when people start saying, amen, hallelujah. The preacher really start going in. I work very much in the same way in my classroom, right? I work on call and response. So I need to know that y'all are vibing with me, that y'all are hearing what I'm laying down. Y'all are understanding this, right? So he says that one of the biggest mistakes that oppressed people make is that they think that to be is to be like. Now you're saying, Dr. Hall, I thought that this was hood feminism. I didn't think that this was a class about liberation or some sort of liberation struggle. It is. It is, right? But feminism, or feminism, right, or the feminist movement was supposed to be a liberation struggle for women. Somebody, please. Are we still class? Are we still in session? Feminism. Now, notice I say to you what it was supposed to be. Feminism or the feminist movement was supposed to be a struggle for freedom. It was supposed to be a struggle for freedom, right? Now, the problem with the feminist movement, however, is that the feminist movement centered largely upon the needs and demands of privileged white women. Hmm, 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 hmm. Well, you say, Dr. Hall, how dare you say that? Susan B. Anthony and the women in the suffrage movement, they fought for all women. How is it that they fought for all women when during the suffrage movement, right, Black folks had only been free from slavery for a couple of years, right? In fact, some of the enslaved people who had been freed were still living. So how is it that they were fighting for all women's rights um, when you had Black women who were serving, taking part in the movement, but they made them march at the back of the line when they had the women's suffrage march? Mhm. And when Black women were fighting alongside their white sisters in the feminist movement, Black folks, not just Black women, Black people in general didn't have the right to vote. So if the feminist movement was about the liberation, right, and the freedom of all people, right, of disenfranchised people and not just white women, they would have helped their Black sisters get the right to vote, which means that they would have helped Black people. And so the feminist movement, many of their moves and their motives were largely convoluted by white privilege. Now that's a hard one. That's a hard pill to swallow, is it not? Give me some thumbs up if you're still following this call. Give me some thumbs up. So what happened is, it's like what usually always happens, because Black women, and we've seen it even during the election, right? We've seen it during the election when Black women were fighting and trying to get people to be involved in the political process, and they were trying to change laws and talk to people about what was happening in the political arena, and people dismiss Black women. And now that they find out that they've gotten what they want because they didn't want it to benefit Black women, now they're sad. Right now, many people are sad, very, very, very sad about this. And so what happens is, when we talk about hood feminism was born out of two different movements created by Black women, right? Because most Black women never aligned themselves with the feminist movement in the first place. Because if you really want to be honest about it, when you talk about Gloria Steinem and these sort of people who were some of the early predecessors of the feminist movement in the 60s and the 70s, right? Everybody should be slightly familiar with the name Gloria Steinem, right? She was one of the most powerful figures in the women's right in the feminist movement. But what happens is that at the same time that feminists were fighting, guess what they were fighting for, y'all? They were fighting these white women. And this is not to get anybody to leave here and be like, I hate white women. No, because we're all aligned in a struggle. We just got to figure out how to fight for one another and not just for one person's cause. Not just for one person's cause, right? Because the problem with the feminist movement was that the feminist movement was exclusive to the needs and concerns of white women. Because what white women were fighting for was the ability to work outside of the home. Y'all, Black women have always had to work outside of the home. During slavery, after slavery, Very rarely did Black women have the, if you want to call it an opportunity, very rarely did Black women have the chance to be stay-at-home moms. And many times, in the case that they were stay-at-home moms, it was because they had so many children that they had to stay at home. It was just cheaper for your grandmothers and your great grandmothers and maybe even your mother to stay home than it was for her to work, right? But it was a mutual choice because socioeconomically, usually Black households were not in a position where they could make a choice for the woman to be able to stay home, right? There's even cases where there's a town, and I think it is South Carolina, where the Black population was really, really affluent, which angered the white population, and they forced the Black women to work and made it a law that all Black women had to work. And so, what did these women have to become? They had to work as domestics. Now, even I know this might upset some people, even though y'all like to help and y'all like to believe that them was good white people. They was good to us. There was a lot there were a lot of layers to that movement, right? There were a lot of layers to the domesticity of Black women. There were a lot of layers to that, and we're going to get in that as this course goes on. We're going to get into that as the course goes on. But what I want for you to understand is this, that because the feminist movement was largely steeped in the needs and demands of white women, Black women had to create their own thing. And you said, why is that? Why is that the case, Dr. Hall? Black women had to create their own thing because Black women have what is called intersectionality. Somebody write that in the comments for me. Intersectionality. Can you write intersectionality in the comments for me? Black women have what is called intersectionality. I'm going to give you a good definition of feminism, hood feminism, that kind of like will help you understand, right? And I wrote it down so I could give you a really good synopsis. Hood feminism is a movement by Black women and other women of color that emphasizes the importance of intersectionality, which means what it means to be both a minority and a woman, but more specifically, what it means to be both Black and woman. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about intersectionality. We're talking about race and gender, because it's one thing to be discriminated against because of race, but it's another thing to be discriminated against because of race and gender at the same time, right? And you said, well, Dr. Hall, how does that happen, right? That is called intersectionality. And so hood feminism rose out of the need to address, right? To address these marginalized communities of Black women, in specific Black women, right? Their experiences and their struggles, right? And other women, other minority women in marginalized communities. And the hood feminists, they advocated not just to work outside of the home, not to make the same amount as upper class white men, which is what white women were fighting for, right? But they were fighting issues like poverty. They were fighting for appropriate health care. Because whether or not you know it, Black women have the highest mortality rates in terms of when they give birth, right? Black women have one of the highest mortality rates. Non-Black doctors are more likely to believe that Black patients, in specific Black women, are being aggressive or being untruthful when they complain about pain and illness. And many Black women have died because of this, right? And so hood feminism addresses those needs. Even when we talk about this fight against what we now call period poverty, right? But you never heard about those things as part of the feminist movement before, did you? Because again, when we talk about feminists, most Black women are not feminists because the feminist movement is largely addressing the needs and concerns of white women. Now, while I'm talking, please, because I can go on and on, because this is one of my favorite topics to talk about. Just like in class, if you have questions or concerns and you want to come up and you have a question that you want to ask me, invite yourself up. Raise your thumb up if you'd like to come up because you have a question that you want to ask, right? Or either if you don't feel comfortable asking a question, coming up with me, put your question in the comments, but make sure that you're tapping that screen for me, because I want to make sure that this gets out to other people, right? Toddy, you have a question that you would like to ask? Because I don't know if I can invite you. Let me see if I can invite you up. I can't invite you up because you have to have at least 1,000 followers in order to, like, TikTok has like a weird thing where you have to have at least 1,000 followers in order to go live, right? And so I cannot invite you up, but put your question in the comments because I'd like to address it. So I'm going to keep going while you guys put questions in the comments. So this hood feminism really addresses the issues that are faced by Black women who suffer from intersectionality, which means they suffer from racism and genderism, right? Where they're being discriminated against because they're a Black and because they're women, but because they're Black and women at the same time. Because what you got to understand is this, right? While there are, and I said this in my video when I was advertising the class, right? While there are a specific subset of stereotypes that are aimed at Black people, also understand that there are a specific subset of stereotypes that are aimed specifically at Black women. It's something holistically different to be both Black and female, right? I want you to think about it in terms of, and I want you, be tapping the screen for me. I want you to be thinking about this, right? I want you to think about how, when you're on social media and you see all these people with podcasts, even non-Black men who feel the need to talk about how unattractive or how angry or how aggressive Black women are. Have y'all ever noticed this before? Give me a thumbs up if you've seen this sort of foolishness on the internet, right? Because what happens is many of the stereotypes that people have about Black women are propagated. They're propagated. Bell Hooks talks about it in several of her essays when she talks about for Black women used to have to fight against 3 specific stereotypes. It may be 4, but I remember 3. Bell Hooks is a queer writer, poet that talks a lot about feminism and Black feminism, right? But Bell Hooks talks about how Black women usually have to fight against 3 specific stereotypes. Now, I want you to know I'm a woman of God. So when I give you these stereotypes, I'm not just cussing just to be gratuitous, just to use gratuitous language, but to help you get the point that I'm trying to make, right? She talks about that usually Black women are categorized as either the bitch, the mammy, or the whore. Give me some thumbs up if you've seen these stereotypes before, right? The B word, when we talk about the itch, right? I'm going to repeat it, but when we talk about the stereotype of the itch, we're talking about, because we see these stereotypes replayed in TV shows all the time. We always see these stereotypes replayed in TV shows all the time. I'll give an example. When you were looking at Martin, right? Pam was the itch. She was the B word, right? When you were looking at Girlfriends, Tony was the itch. Maya was the itch. Joan was the kind of the mammy character because she was sort of taking care of everybody. That was her job, to sort of be a mother figure to everybody, right? And Lynn was the whore. And if you look at TV sometimes with a critical eye, whenever you see Black women on TV, you see one of these 3 stereotypes. Very rarely do you get to see Black women play these very, very organic roles. That's true. Not nanny, but mammy. Like mammy, like Miss Butterworth. The kind of heavyset lady with the rag on her head, right? That's mammy. So and so Toddy says you see the mammy in a lot of Tyler Perry movies. You really do, right? And that's no knock against the brother Tyler Perry because he employs a lot of Black actors. So I say, brother, do your thing, right? But what happens is that we constantly see this propaganda that reinforces these stereotypes. We constantly see a reinforcement of these stereotypes all over TV, right? All over. And then when you talk about, let's say, for instance, when we look at When we look at social media, we listen to music. Right now, we're seeing more whores. We see that stereotype of the whore more than anything. The whore and the bitch, right? If we look at, I give you another example. When you look at Real Housewives of Atlanta, right? Constantly, these women are portrayed as bitches and whores. They're either hypersexual or hyper angry. But you could very well look at um, the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City or one of these other shows, and these women are not labeled in the same way. For example, we could look at a show that has our Latina sisters, and a Latina sister may exhibit many of the same behaviors that black women exhibit. She may get a little feisty, and they'll call her fiery. They'll call her passionate, but they'll call a black woman angry for the same behavior. Hmm? And when let's say a white woman has a lot of boyfriends and she does a lot of dating, and they just consider it youthful indiscretion, right? Like the show Sex in the City, right? You remember Carrie? Carrie was outside. We go back. Carrie was for the streets. She lived her best life, but never, not once, did Carrie get portrayed as a whore, right? But then if we juxtapose that to a television show with black women, quite often the black women will exhibit that same behavior, and instantly she'll be branded a whore. Why? Because it is propaganda that furthers these stereotypes and beliefs to diminish the character and the personhood of black women. It diminishes the character and the personhood of black women, right? Remember when I said the subtitle of this course was The Fight for Black Women's Agency. Agency simply meaning the ability for the voiceless to have a voice. The ability for you to create the narrative about who you are without using the lens of other people. Don't y'all think that's important? Give me some thumbs up. Give me some thumbs up. Like, this is a serious thing. Toddy asked, are hood feminism and Afrofeminism identical, or do they have distinct principles and objectives? Toddy, that is a wonderful question. That is a wonderful question. So hood feminism and Afrofeminism are slightly different, right? It's kind of like the difference between black feminism and womanism, right? So womanism is a term, and somebody put that in the comments for me. Womanism. Put womanism in the comments for me. Womanism, and that's woman with ism on the end, right? Womanism is a term that was coined by Alice Walker, the writer of The Color Purple, right? And she's written many other fabulous texts, but The Color Purple is one that most people know her for, right? She wrote She wrote the book The Color Purple, which was adapted into a screenplay and a play. So when Alice Walker coined the term womanism, she coined it because she was illustrating that the fact that feminism was never a term that fit black women. It was never a term that fit black women. Only in maybe like the latter half of the 20th century or the 21st century would you really find black women who refer to themselves as feminists. More than likely, they will refer to themselves as black feminists or womanists. A womanist is somebody who understands, according to Alice Walker, right? According to Alice Walker, a womanist is someone who understands that while I'm fighting for my black womanhood, I've also got to fight for my community, because I can't rise if my family can't rise, right? So she's advocating. And so you would say, well, that seems kind of like that seems convoluted. No, it doesn't, because no other movement before, even when we talk about the civil rights movement, was very much largely male dominated, right? They operated from the perspective that women were to work, but not necessarily voices that needed to be heard. Y'all weren't expecting for Dr. Hall to say that, was you? It's the truth in the how, right? So when Alice Walker coined that term womanism, what she's saying is that even though the brothers may have ignored us and disregarded us and left us out, we'll always fight for them. We see it all the time, right? When you talk about the people that started the Black Lives Matter movement, right? These were primarily black women who were fighting against police brutality that was aimed at black men. That's primarily what the movement was about. However, a lot of times when men start these movements, the women, the rights and the rights, responsibilities, and the issues of women are largely overlooked and ignored. How many of you would agree with that? Give me a thumbs up if you would agree with that. Right? And so Toddy says, are hood feminism and Afro feminism the same thing? So hood feminism is really more about, hood feminism sort of looks at the socioeconomic conditions, right? Hood feminism analyzes and seeks to address the socioeconomic issues of disenfranchised black women, right? And these and hood feminism and Afro feminism are really two very 21st century terms, right? 20th, but more so 21st century terms, right? So these would be the millennials and the millennials and the Generation X and generations, the Gen Zers. This would be sort of their understanding and their analysis of where feminism is, right? Afrofeminism would be more just like black feminism in that, but it's more of a 21st century span in that it addresses it addresses the issues of the 21st century black woman, right? And it also includes our Afro Latino sisters, right? You know that Afro term is usually a way more inclusive, where hood is more about the socioeconomic status, right? And so I think that it's extremely important, right, that we understand, especially in this climate, we understand who we are and what it is that we're fighting for, because we're not necessarily fighting for the same thing. We're not necessarily fighting for the same thing. You say, well, Dr. Hall, how can you say we're not fighting for the same thing? I can say that we're not fighting for the same thing because when you look at this last election, right, non-black women didn't really have Kamala's back like that. And I'm not saying it makes you a bad person, because sometimes, like say for instance, that somebody aligned themselves with another candidate because of their religious beliefs, right? But just because I align myself with the candidate because of my religious beliefs does not mean that I overlook his flaws, right? Because we know that, and you should have called the brother out for the flaws before you got to voting for the brother. But that's a whole nother topic for a day. I ain't getting into that right now because I don't want anybody to shut me down, right? So right now we're going to stay with the concept of hood feminism, right? And I also want you to put intersectionality in the comments. Put intersectionality. And so whenever you use the word intersectionality, what you're talking about is you're talking about, you know how you come to an intersection when you're driving, that means like two streets are crossing. Well, intersectionality is a term that is used because what we're looking at, Toddy's gonna be my straight A student. I see it already. But intersectionality is a term that is used to talk about how two things kind of conglomerate together to make one identity, right? So what it means to be both black and woman, what it means to be both poor and poor and uneducated, right? There's an intersection of situations and circumstances. So, but the thing about the intersection is we can never say it's just one thing or the other, because that intersection exists. There's still two ideas merging. So we can never, black women can never separate being black from being a woman. We'll never be able to separate that. It is what it is. Do I have any more questions in the comments, right? Let me know, are you enjoying this? Because I want, and tell me what are some questions you have. So I hope I answered Toddy's question. And I'm trying to scroll down to see if I have any other questions. But I think this is extremely important for us to understand, because I want for us to understand that when we're talking about hood feminism, right, it's very different. It's a very different, um, very different than mainstream feminism. Very different than mainstream feminism. We got a whole different fight on our hands, right? Because even now in today's climate, right? In today's climate, let's say that feminists, right? When we're talking about people who supported a certain candidate in this particular election, a lot of those people supported that candidate because they thought that DEI was something that was effectual and beneficial to Black folks only. Didn't they mess around and find out, y'all? Did they mess around and find out? Because what we have seen is, right? So the Antoinette, but did that help you get an understanding of it? Did that definition help you get an understanding, Antoinette? Right? And so, but what many people have messed around and find out is that DEI was not about promoting a Black agenda. Neither was it beneficial only to Black folks. It's just like when a particular community that I won't name fought so hard to end affirmative action because they thought that affirmative action was the reason why so many Black students were getting into Ivy League institutions, right? So they fought hard to end and what happened? They messed around and found out. So when they got rid of when they got rid of affirmative action at these Ivy League institutions, the rate at which this particular ethnic group was accepted declined, but the rate at which African American students were accepted remained the same. Why? Because African American people were never the largest beneficiaries of affirmative action. It was usually white women and Asians. Now, does that make white women and Asians bad people? No. But they fought against their own benefit because they thought it benefited us. And so you got to be very clear. Black folks have got to be very clear, right? About what the struggle is. And sometimes we have been compassionate to our own demise. You weren't expecting me to say that, were you? Sometimes we have been inclusive to our own demise. Huh? So what happens is when we talk about this idea of hood feminism and womanism, Black women have got to remain very, very clear about what their agenda is. Because when we align ourselves, notice when we start aligning ourselves with other folks' agendas, they fight for them primarily, and they fight for themselves primarily. So what happens is that Black women and Black folks are left to fight for themselves. So Toddy asked, do we have Black men that also participate in hood feminism? Antoinette said they're not worried about us. Antoinette, they're not like us. Because Black folk by nature are very compassionate, understanding people. I think we do have brothers that fight for womanism and hood feminism, right? Because there are a lot of brothers that speak out against. There are a lot of brothers. Maybe that was an exaggeration, but there are brothers that speak out against the mistreatment and denigration of Black women, right? I remember when there was a Black woman who was in higher education administration. And last year, the sister ended up, taking her own life because of the stress of her job. There were a few men that worked with her that spoke up for her in terms of talking about what happened to her and how she had been overlooked and ignored. So I do think that there are some men, but I also think that brothers have got to be educated about what Black feminism, womanism, and hood feminism is, right? Because too many times people have such a limited definition and they think what it means is that Black women want to be independent. They don't need a man for nothing. All these Black women want to be feminists. They don't want no men's. They don't even like men's. And that's not at all what we're saying. We're not saying it at all, right? Because we need them and they need us, right? It makes our communities stronger. It makes our communities better when we love one another, when we understand one another, right? I liken it to, I remember many, many years ago, I was dating a guy and he used to always complain about me not liking to cook. I don't know what it is, y'all. I feel like cooking is against my religion. I like to eat now. You can see that. Okay. However, I don't like to cook. So my boo at the time, he used to always complain about me not liking to cook, right? And he would tell me how his mother loved to cook, right? And so I told him at the time, I said, bro, I said, let me tell you something. I said, what happens is that probably your mama did all this cooking because your daddy probably paid all the bills. So I said, but I be tired when I get through working. Like I don't feel like cooking no meal. I ain't got no kids. It's just me. Right? I wouldn't think about him like that. Like I wasn't thinking, oh, he's my boyfriend. I gotta cook for him. I never felt like that, right? So and I remember when I went home with him to visit his parents one time, and I was talking to his mom. And when I was having a conversation with his mom, I asked his mom, I said, Mrs. So and so says that you love cooking. She said, no, I don't. I just did it because I knew if I didn't do it, nobody else would. Right? And so what happens is that a lot of times brothers have to be taught to have compassion toward the struggle of women. Many brothers are gonna have to be taught because sometimes they have seen the struggles of their mothers and grandmothers, and they appreciate the struggle without thinking about what the struggle did to them, how the struggle shortened their lives, how the struggle caused them to suffer from all kind of heartaches and heartbreaks, how the struggle caused them to die early, right? They don't think about it. My grandmama worked 3 jobs, but she didn't want to. She did it because she had to. Give me some thumbs up if this is making sense to you, right? And so what we're asking brothers to do is to join with us in trying to understand what this struggle is like for Black women, right? Because one of the things that I think about today, right? Because we keep hearing these conversations about how brothers want women to go 50-50 with them and this, that, and the other, right? And one thing I always tell, because I work on the college campus and I always work with a lot of young men, and I love them. They my baby. I call them my babies, right? But one thing I always tell them is I say, listen, and I tell brothers my age this too. I say, y'all got to stop wanting to live in a modern world but hold antiquated views. I'm gonna say it again for the students that just came in to be nosy, because maybe you'll pick it up and you'll run with it. I say you gotta stop wanting to live in a modern world but hold antiquated views, right? And you say, well, what do you mean when you say they want to live in a modern world but hold antiquated views, Dr. Hall? What do you mean? Meaning they want you to go to work every day, make a lot of money, so y'all can both live lavishly and take all these trips, and y'all go half and half on the bills, right? That's modern. That's a very modern perspective, right? So in the mind you working, right? Doesn't mind you working. But the antiquated part is you think I'm gonna work just as hard as you and come home still cook, clean, take care of kids, rub your feet, and be ready to do whenever you want to do. That's antiquated. Because a lot of times some of these women that you were looking at, they were stay-at-home moms, right? Or they did what they did under duress, right? They did it by default because they knew nobody else would do it. And not only is it not realistic, Toddy, but it is killing and has killed so many Black women, right? Because what happens is that too many of us have adopted that superwoman narrative. Write that in the comments for me. Too many of us have adopted the superwoman narrative. Too many of us have, oh, I'm a strong Black woman. I could go to work every day. I come home, cook and clean for the kids, help them with the homework, volunteer at the church. And that superwoman, this idea, the superwoman stereotype of this strong Black woman that can do everything and anything, is killed a lot of folks before time. Why do you think so many sisters have hypertension? So many sisters are, because unlike other people, Black women they're not usually gonna drink and smoke themselves to death. They'll eat themselves to death. So many women suffer from obesity, right? Obesity or overeating, right? These are stress. These are things they do because of stress. Because there is nobody to lighten the load, so to speak, right? And what we've got to do is we've got to define, we've got to begin to, and even that's why I also, another thing I encourage women to do is talk to your sons, your nephews, your husbands, your brothers. Talk to them about the struggles of being a Black woman, right? I'm not saying go around, woe is me. Oh my God, I'm so sad. It's so hard for me as a Black woman in the world, right? But the problem is that ignorance is bliss. And so you do have a large population of Black men who operate under the system of patriarchy and behave just as poorly as the oppressor, because they do not understand, and nobody has ever shared with them the struggles of Black women. And so I think that even in that hood feminism, this class is important not just to women, but it's important to women, men, Black women, white women, because what people don't understand is that many of the things that they stereotype Black women for, right? Many of the things that they stereotype Black women for are are not true, but they're also things that denigrate our existence, and they take away our personhood. They take away our personhood. And you say, well, Dr. Hall, what do you mean when you say they take away our personhood? What I mean is, let's say, for instance, you get a job and you work in a environment where there's mostly non-Black people. Well, usually they've usually what happens is that they've collected opinion about you before they even get to know you, because of these stereotypes that are so progressive and pervasive. And so in part of promoting hood feminism and womanism, what we're trying to do is do away with this propaganda that denigrates the Black woman's identity and allows Black women to have agency, gives Black women a voice, right? Defines the fight, the intersectional fight that Black women have. Is this making sense to everybody? Is this everybody still following this car? Or is Dr. Hall going too fast? Let me know if you're still following this car. So, you know, I'm really excited about this class. I don't want to give you too much too soon. I'm really excited about this. And I think that we're going to really get into some heavyweight topics as we go on. And I'm hoping that, you guys will be able to join me up top so that you can really, really have some back and forth dialogue. But I also want for us to think about this, right? Because this is also something um, that I think often about. Often I think about the fact that um, because we're not having real life conversations with younger sisters, with younger Black women, they don't understand what a Black feminist or womanist identity is, and their idea of female liberation is very much convoluted. I give an example. So I remember we were talking one time. I had to deliver a speech to some students at Cheney. Right, they had this particular class, and I was asked to speak to the class, and um, I think they were talking about. Uh, I can't remember the specifics, but the topic of conversation that I was supposed to talk to them about was sex, right? And I remember there were a number of, and this might be controversial to some of you, but in it, and it may be controversial, but I want to be controversial. I want for us to be able to discuss things. While our white counterparts, they have the ability to talk about sexual liberation, right? Black women are haunted by this myth of whorishness. They're haunted by this myth of whorishness, right? And not only is it myth, but it's propaganda and a stereotype that haunts us, right? Like even when you talk about people from other countries, when you see these sisters that have gone to these other countries, and people see them and actually assume they're prostitutes because they're Black and they're able to travel, and you're like, what the what? So you think I'm a prostitute? Like what the? Come on, I got a full turtleneck and a jacket on. Like, how am I friends? Like, this is crazy. But these stereotypes, right? Because remember, I said to you, many people, because of the pervasive nature of the propaganda that has gone out about propaganda that has always existed about Black people, and the pervasiveness of the messages about who we are, right? And the reality, and this is a very sad reality. The reality is this: is that many non-Black people don't have uh, proximity to Blackness other than what they see on TV. They don't have proximity to Blackness other than what they have on TV and in the radio. And so, if this is the only knowledge or the only experience that they have with Blackness is what they see on TV or what they hear on the radio, what do you think they're going to believe about Black folks? In specific, what are they going to believe about Black women? Right? And so, the conversation when we were talking about sex was many of the young ladies were talking about how they love how, Cardi B and Meg the Stallion, like they were role models to them because they were out there, they were doing whatever they wanted to do, they were having a good time and they loved it, and they just thought that was so liberating and free. And I juxtaposed to them that what these images did, and the lack of a contrast of any other kind of image, right? The lack of a contrast, what these images did were to propagate stereotypes that already exist. Because if the consciousness of American society already believed that Black women were hypersexual, and now we have a Sukianna, a Cardi, a Meg, and all these other rappers, and all they do is talk about sex and threesomes and all this other stuff. All they're doing is further propagating the denigrating images that already exist. They're not doing anything to debunk this stuff. They're just propagating old stereotypes and notions. And so I think that to believe that is sexual liberation is a fallacy. Now, one thing I don't do is, and we'll get into this later, right? We'll get into this a little bit more later. I don't get into respectability politics, right? I'm gonna give you a quick synopsis of it, but we're gonna come back to it later. Respectability politics says that Black people have to perform or behave in a certain way in order to get the respect of people outside of Black culture. That's what respectability politics is all about. It's saying that, well, if y'all would dress up, if y'all would stop wearing these bonnets to Walmart, white people would respect us. Well, if y'all would stop dressing like this and these boys would pull their pants up, then the police wouldn't pull them over. Well, if y'all would stop wearing all these big eyelashes, you could get a promotion on your job. So respectability politics is essentially saying that if you were to carry yourself better, then people will respect you. But respectability politics is a fallacy. Because if that were the case, why is it that during the civil rights movement, these people wore full-on three-piece suits and Sunday dresses to march and fight against oppression, and they were still killed, watered down with the high-powered water hoses? All of these things happen, and they still were disrespected by the American citizens, by the American public. The very people that were supposed to protect them violated them. So I don't get into respectability politics, but I do believe that there are things that we do that propagate certain images, and it becomes part of a larger propaganda that says Black people are like this. So I'm going to end it right here because I've given you enough, and I don't want to do information overload night one of class. But I'm so glad that you guys joined me. Please bring a friend next time. Bring a friend next time because we're going to have a good time. We're going to talk about some more. And if you haven't got the textbook, make sure you get the textbook, right? Because in the next class, we're going to be talking about, we're going to be reading a poem by B. Richards, And it's all of this is in the book, right? The book is only $4.99 and the syllabus is free. The syllabus is free. But the book I charge for because I curated the things that I wanted you to read and I included them in the text so that you wouldn't have to go around looking for them. And it gives you some very thought-provoking questions. Oh, thank you, Toddy. Thank you. And so I really want, I got some questions in there to make you think long range because I want you to remember this. Education, right? It's not just about you learning stuff so that you go out and be like, I'm so and so, so and so. But the root word of education is ado, which comes from the Greek, which means to change. So whatever you learn should in some way change you and make you better and give you ammunition to go back in the world and make it better. So there should be something that you take away from this class that makes you better, that makes you a more powerful woman, that enables you to empower your community. Not just other women, but your community, right? And if you're a non-Black person that is joining us, it should make you want to understand a culture outside of your own and be more empathetic, compassionate, and understanding, and also debunk a bunch of the foolishness that you've been taught to believe. All right. So I thank you guys. You know, if you have some other questions that you want me to talk about in the context of our class next Tuesday night, I'll probably come back on later this week, right? I want you to move on to the assignment, right? Oh, thank you, Shell. Thank you, Toddy. And who's my other who Antoinette, okay? So I want to make sure that so when you're getting your textbook, there is a reflection assignment, right? But there's also a reading assignment for us to do for next week. And I'm going to ask you a couple of questions because I really, really want to delve in this thing with you. And I said it for 4 weeks, but I think we're probably going to go a little bit longer than 4 weeks. And I'm going to come back on probably later this week as my office hours. I love this thing so much, right? Y'all don't know. Y'all don't know. Okay. But I'm going to probably come back on later this week or maybe Saturday morning for my office hours so that we can have some more dialogue because I really, really want to get to know you guys and I really want to be able to answer your questions and really, and remember I tell you Dr. Hall is a sophisticated, so I'm going to say some academic terms and some non-academic terms. I want to be able to chop it up with y'all, okay? I'm going to chop it up with you. So I love you. I hope you have an awesome night. Holla. You have an awesome night. Holla.